In our headlines on this Tuesday afternoon, May 28th, here on the Korean Peninsula. North Korea acknowledges that its attempt back on Monday to place a second satellite into space ended in failure. South Korea and its allies, for their part, have condemned the attempt. Meanwhile, the latest trilateral meeting among South Korea, Japan and China called for regular regional exchanges with a joint declaration that covers cooperation on 6 fronts, namely civilian exchanges, climate change, disaster relief, economic ventures, public health and scientific initiatives. And an Israeli air raid against Rafah on Sunday set ablaze a shelter for displaced Palestinians, killing dozens. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday acknowledged the, quote, tragic mistake. We start with news of North Korea's failed attempt to place a second spy satellite into space Monday night. Our correspondent Peunji has details.
This is the moment when a suspected military reconnaissance satellite launched by North Korea exploded mid-air. The video, released by the South Korean military, was filmed by surveillance equipment on a military patrol vessel deployed to waters northwest of the country. Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff said it detected the launch fired over the West Sea at about 10:44 p.m. on Monday night. But 2 minutes after the launch, it exploded into multiple pieces of debris above North Korean waters. The military said intelligence authorities of Seoul and Washington are currently conducting a detailed analysis of the launch, and that South Korea, the U.S., and Japan activated a missile warning system by deploying Aegis destroyers to designated areas in advance. North Korea also admitted that its attempt to launch a new military reconnaissance satellite failed when a newly developed rocket engine exploded in midair during the first stage of flight. Citing its Deputy Director General of National Aerospace Technology Administration, the regime's state media said initial analysis showed this was due to a newly developed liquid fuel rocket motor, but other possible causes are being investigated. The attempt came just hours after Pyongyang issued a warning on Monday, saying that it would try to launch a satellite by June 4th, which would have been its second spy satellite in orbit. The Japanese government earlier issued an emergency warning for residents in the south to take cover from the possible threat, before lifting the warning, saying the rocket was not expected to fly over Japanese territory. But the Japanese Defense Minister Minoru Kihara said they would continue to work on monitoring signs of threats and analyzing information as the North may attempt another launch within the notified period. Peunji, Arirang News.
And amid those very concerns, South Korea and its allies have rebuked the regime's latest launch attempt, reiterating its violation of UN Security Council resolutions. Our Lee Soo-jin reports.
South Korea and the United States have both heavily criticized North Korea's attempt to put another spy satellite into orbit. During a meeting led by the director of the National Security Office, Jang Ho-jin, on Monday night, the launch was condemned as a violation of UN Security Council resolutions, regardless of whether it failed or not. During the meeting, attendees also called the launch an act of provocation that threatened peace and security on the Korean Peninsula, Northeast Asia, and the international community. The U.S. Indo-Pacific Command said in a statement on Monday local time that it condemns the launch as clear violation of several UN Security Council resolutions. The statement also said that the launch involved technologies directly related to North Korea's intercontinental ballistic missile program, and that the U.S.'s defense commitments to South Korea and Japan remain ironclad. Meanwhile, Japan's defense minister Minoru Kihara called the launch a serious challenge to the entire world. North Korea's state media announced that the launch of the satellite carrier rocket failed when it exploded in mid-air during the first stage flight soon after liftoff due to a suspected engine problem. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Monday's trilateral meeting among South Korea, Japan and China saw participants pledging to put regional cooperation back on track with a joint declaration covering 6 specific areas ranging from civilian exchanges to climate change. Our presidential correspondent Kim Do-yeon fills us in.
Fully restoring and normalizing relations was a key goal for this 9th trilateral summit between South Korea, Japan, and China, which resumed after 4 years and 5 months. And on Monday, President Yoon Suk-yeol, as the host of the summit, says it did just that.
오늘을 기점으로 3국 정상회의는 정상화되었고 올해로 25주년을 맞이한 한일 중 협력 체제가 앞으로 더욱 성장해 나갈 수 있는 발판이 마련되었습니다.
They also acknowledged that they share some of the key issues such as aging demographics and supply chain disruptions, and by working together they can resolve them.
Since the last trilateral summit, the international community has faced diverse, complex and interconnected problems. Additionally, there are significant common issues among our three countries, such as low birth rates and aging populations.
We agree that in the face of new challenges and opportunities, South Korea-China-Japan cooperation must demonstrate new responsibilities and actions.
The summit comes after months of efforts by South Korea to make it happen. And President Yoon, on top of normalization of the relations, has emphasized tangible results for the citizens. In fact, the joint declaration the three adopted laid out the resumption of many dialogues between the three parties on top of specific actions they will take going forward. There were 6 main parts: civilian exchanges, climate change, the economy, public health, science, and disaster relief. Some tangible results were announced through the declaration. For the people-to-people exchange, the three will designate 2025 to 2026 as the year of cultural exchange among the three countries. For climate change response, they will collaborate with Mongolia to reduce dust and sandstorms in East Asia. And in terms of the economic and trade aspect, they will continue discussions to speed up trilateral FTA negotiations. In terms of public health and aging societies, the three will tackle future infectious diseases, and they adopted a separate joint statement on this. For science and tech cooperation, the three will resume the Trilateral Science and Technology Ministers meeting.
이번 회의에서 채택된 공동 선언은 우리 3국이 민생 증진과 영내 평화와 번영을 위해 긴밀히 협력하겠다는 의지를 담고 있습니다.
Next up as the host is Japan, and the leaders agreed that they look forward to the 10th summit without notifying when it will take place. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Also, on Monday, the three countries held a separate business summit with industry insiders to address their shared hopes of bolstering regional trade. Our correspondent Moon Hae-ryan covers these talks.
As neighboring countries, South Korea, Japan and China's economies are closely linked, celebrating 25 years of trilateral cooperation this year. At the 8th edition of a business summit on Monday afternoon in Seoul, the leaders and 240 business heads came together to discuss a wide range of regional topics. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida remarked on the common challenges the countries face, such as aging populations, while Chinese Premier Li Qiang spoke of deepening industrial cooperation as Beijing looks to stabilize its supply chain network. President Yoon Suk-yeol commented on the need for the neighbors to respond to global issues together, as well as further developing trade agreements.
3국 간 교역 투자 플랫폼인 RCEP의 활용도를 높이는 동시에 2019년 이후 중단된 한일 중 FTA 협상을 조속히 재개하여 경제 협력 기반을 업그레이드해야 합니다.
Accounting for nearly a quarter of the world's GDP, the three countries have attempted to facilitate easier trading in the past. Negotiations on a free trade agreement began in 2012, with 16 rounds of talks since then. FTAs abolished tariffs and barriers, but progress on a trilateral agreement has been slow for a variety of reasons. The last negotiations were in 2019, and factors including COVID-19 and Beijing-Washington tensions have hindered progress. Other economic partnerships, such as the China-led CPTPP and Japan-led RCEP, have also diverted attention away from the trilateral FTA. However, economic relations between Seoul and Tokyo have improved, with resumed finance leader talks last year ending a 7-year hiatus. But Japan falls behind the likes of the United States and China when it comes to South Korea's exports. And an expert explains why FTA negotiations between the two have been slow, and what Seoul is attempting to achieve through a free trade agreement with Tokyo.
Even though Korean products are pretty good and less expensive, they are sticking to their own product. So main target of Korean, government and Korean corporations are, penetrating into Japanese market.
As for trade relations with China, it was formerly the country's biggest destination for exports before the US took over. Data from the Bank of Korea show that the value of outbound shipments to the US overtook those to China for the first time in 21 years in the first quarter of this year. But the Sino-Korean FTA that was set in motion to cover goods trade could now be expanded to the services sector to include tourism and culture.
The expansion of free trade agreements in other areas like services and investment, and the interaction of people that are most important, and that is in the traditional kind of interest of free trade agreements. So I think it is a necessary and a natural process of development.
With these negotiations between Seoul and Beijing scheduled for next month, and Yoon's urging to resume FTA talks, attempts to strengthen economic ties are definitely underway. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
President Seoul is poised to play host to his counterpart from the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. While the official welcoming ceremony will take place tomorrow, that is Wednesday, the two leaders will begin their engagement later on this Tuesday evening. According to the presidential office here, on the agenda are plans to bolster partnership in key arenas ranging from energy to defense. The two-day state visit marks the first by the president of the UAE to Korea. Indeed, this inaugural state visit by UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan is fueling much anticipation about prospects of greater partnership between Seoul and Abu Dhabi. Our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young covers these prospects.
Ahead of President Yoon Suk-yeol's bilateral summit with United Arab Emirates President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan on Wednesday, experts and the media are expecting a detailed follow-up on their pledge last year to further advance their special strategic partnership. On Monday, Emirates news agency said the two countries' partnership promises to unlock new frontiers, noting that trade and investment between the two sides have already seen a significant increase. Bilateral trade in non-oil sectors hit $5.3 billion in 2023, a 12.5% increase on year. But there's more room for growth as both countries move towards the post-oil era.
With South Korea's diverse areas of expertise, the potential cooperation is limitless. Nuclear energy, semiconductors, reusable batteries, automobiles, biodefense, and aerospace. Also, the UAE is in need of a strong manufacturing base. In this regard, establishing a South Korean industrial complex would build R&D centers or factories in the country. This could help the UAE reshape its industrial structure to support and expand exports of its domestic products to the world.
During the summit in Abu Dhabi last year, the UAE leader promised to invest $30 billion in South Korea's strategic industries. The two governments in October concluded a bilateral trade pact removing tariffs on over 91% of all items traded over the next 10 years. Seoul says on top of furthering cooperation in trade, energy and nuclear power, defense will be another major summit agenda on Wednesday.
Due to the threat posed by North Korea, South Korea has made strenuous efforts to achieve self-sufficiency in national defense. Following the United States reducing its military presence in the Middle East, the UAE has been aiming to reduce its security dependence on one particular country. Instead of engaging in only weapon sales, South Korea and the UAE would be able to reduce various geopolitical risks by jointly developing their arms industries and engaging more strategic and joint operations together.
Yoon's office has said the UAE is the only country in the Middle East with which South Korea has established a special strategic partnership, likening their solidarity to an alliance.
Rather than engaging in competition, the two countries must join together in solidarity in order to maximize both their national interest. Korea's technology and human resources, combined with the UAE's capital, enterprising spirit, and global nature, both countries can become pivotal force through their exemplary case of solidarity, encouraging peace and prosperity across both Middle East and Northeast Asia.
With the first ever visit of an Emirati leader to Seoul, Emirates news agency said the two sides are poised to demonstrate what development and prosperity paragons can do as partners. Seoul, Arirang News.
On the local political front, the 21st National Assembly is holding the last plenary session of its term this afternoon. On the agenda is a vote on the bill calling for a special probe into the death of a Marine. Now, this marks the second time the bill is being addressed at the Parliament, as its first approval was vetoed by the President. The opposition Democratic Party has been urging for an independent investigation of potential government interference in the military investigation on the death of the young Marine during a rescue operation following floods last year. In other news, an Israeli air raid against Rafah on Sunday set ablaze a shelter for displaced Palestinians, killing dozens. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday acknowledged the, quote, tragic mistake. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
At least 45 people were killed and more than 200 others injured after an Israeli airstrike at a refugee camp in Rafah. In response to the casualties, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the strike a tragic mistake.
In Rafah, we already evacuated about 1 million non-combatant residents, and despite our utmost effort not to harm non-combatants, something unfortunately went tragically wrong. We are investigating the incident and will reach conclusions because this is our policy.
Netanyahu added that while every non-combatant that is hurt is a tragedy, for Hamas, it's a strategy. According to the Gaza Health Ministry and Palestinian medics, most of the casualties were women and children. Washington has long warned Israel to make sure there are limited civilian casualties in Rafah. But with dozens killed in the recent airstrike, the White House is now assessing whether Israel has crossed the line. U.S. officials speaking to media outlet Axios said that the Biden administration is assessing if the airstrike is a violation of what President Biden called a red line, adding that a humanitarian crisis due to the mass displacement of civilians from Rafah could also constitute a violation. Meanwhile, the EU has decided to resume its mission to directly manage and monitor the Rafah border crossing for the first time in 17 years. Joseph Borrell, the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security, announced Monday that an agreement was reached on the revival of the EU Border Assistance Mission at a meeting of foreign ministers of the 27 EU countries held in Brussels. The mission was first organized in 2005 by the EU to be dispatched to border areas marred in conflict to monitor, control, and manage the flow of people and goods as a neutral third party. It was dispatched to the Rafah checkpoint, but their activities were temporarily suspended after about 2 years when Hamas took complete control of the Gaza Strip in June 2007. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In related news, the UN Security Council is set to hold an emergency meeting Tuesday afternoon in response to the tragic event in Rafah. The meeting was reportedly requested by Algeria, a non-permanent member representing the Arab region. The civilian casualties said to stand at well above 200 as of Monday, and UN human rights authorities claim the incident reaffirms the lack of safe refuge in Gaza amid Israeli strikes.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. Yemen's Iran-backed Houthis announced on Monday that they successfully launched aerial attacks against 3 ships in the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea, as well as on 2 U.S. destroyers in the Red Sea. Via a televised speech, Houthis military spokesperson Yahya Sari named the attacked ships as American Largo Desert in the Indian Ocean, the Israeli ship MSC Michela in the Indian Ocean, and the Minerva Lisa in the Red Sea. Sari did not name the 2 U.S. destroyers, and none of the ships have confirmed any damage. Sari added that the attacks are to support the oppressed Palestinian people until the aggression is stopped and the siege on the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip is lifted. The Houthis have carried out multiple aerial attacks against international ships in the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean region since last November. Russia will build a small nuclear power plant in Uzbekistan, a first in post-Soviet Central Asia. That's according to Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev at a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Monday. Putin, who is on his 3rd foreign trip since his re-election, said Russia would put $400 million into a joint investment of $500 million to finance the nuclear projects in Uzbekistan. The Kremlin said Russia's Rosatom will build up to 6 nuclear reactors with a capacity of up to 55 megawatts. Although Uzbekistan and its neighbor Kazakhstan are both producers of uranium, the Uzbek project will be the first of the 5 ex-Soviet Central Asian countries to construct nuclear power plants. Moving over to South Asia, where at least 16 people had been killed as of Monday as Cyclone Remal crashed into coastal parts of India and southern Bangladesh. Bangladeshi Minister for Disaster Management, Mohibur Rahman, said that at least 10 died in the country's southwestern port area of Mongla and that 3.75 million people had been affected. In India's West Bengal, a senior official from the state government confirmed that at least 6 civilians had died, including 3 by electrocution. Cyclone Remal made landfall on Sunday with gales of up to 110 kilometers per hour, accompanied by tidal surges and torrential rain. Authorities said some 8.4 million people live in the cyclone's path. A 60-year-old Argentinian woman challenging the youth-obsessed norms of beauty competed in the annual Miss Universe contest's regional stage in Argentina. Alejandra Marisa Rodriguez, a legal advisor for a hospital in La Plata, south of the capital Buenos Aires, came short of winning the Miss Argentina crown at the competition on Saturday, but won Best Face. Rodriguez's inclusion attracted the attention of the world's media as it came in the first year since the Miss Universe beauty pageant scrapped its long-standing age limit. The contest, which began in 1952, only allowed women between the ages of 18 and 28 to compete until last year. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. After a nice break from the early summer heat, the warmth returns for western parts of the country. But the East Coast is having a big drop in highs, hovering around 20 degrees Celsius this afternoon with that easterly winds. And there will also be spotty rain for parts of the East Coast and passing rain for inland regions of Jeollanam-do and Gyeongsang-namdo province during the day today. Meanwhile, tons of sunshine is in the forecast for the rest of the country. UV rays will be high to very high in many parts of the country with a strong breeze. Seoul gets up to 26 degrees, Daejeon topping out at 25 degrees, and Daegu and Busan will also see a high of 25 degrees Celsius this afternoon. And air quality will be decent nationwide all day today. Then we are looking at a week of sunny skies and warm temperatures. Take advantage of the weather before it gets too warm, not to mention weather experts are predicting a scorching summer heat this year. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
Right, and those are the top stories at this hour here in Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, and today we speak about Korea's new space center. Do stay with us.